Hello and welcome to the Stateside Soccer Show. My name is Jordan, and with me, as always, is Logan. As we, can you believe it, start the previews for 2024 already? How are you today, Logan?
Jordan, are we crazy? We finish each other's sentences, right? Um, Man, it feels like we've been gone forever, Jordan, but we've only been gone for like a month, so it's been wild.
Yeah, I mean, we took like the holidays off and then came back, and it's time to let's get this out front, right? We said last time we're going to do the report cards. That's going to be mixed in with this because then we realized, oh crap, it's time to start these previews mathematically to get these out in time. And so if you're new to the show, what we've done, like our first year, we did a preview for every single club. I think we did that year two as well. Year three, we said hell no. And that was
Yeah,
27, 28 episodes. This year would be 29, or last year would have been 29, and the first time was 28. So we said no, we're going to do kind of what we did last year, which is about 5 teams a preview. We're starting with the West, and we are going to start from the bottom. So it's going to be the bottom 5 teams of the West. And in each episode, we're hoping to have one guest from a team that we highlight in that episode. This week, we are going to be highlighting the Colorado Rapids. So that's how the previews are going to work. So that's how we're going to shake it out. We're going to have a guest on for the Rapids. We have Braidon Nourse from the Denver Post, who will be joining us very shortly here. But before we dive into it, are you feeling good? You ready to dive back into these?
yeah. I always, I think we've talked about this before, but this always is our busiest time of year. Making the notes, making the graphics, getting the guest on, editing the podcast. Yeah, it's a lot of coordination. It's like a synchronized, I guess, dance or swim, I guess, because I feel like we're always trying to just stay afloat. But yeah, no, I love this. I love this time of year because we get to revisit teams that, and we also talk about this a lot, that we don't really get to see as much or talk about as much, because once teams start to kind of, especially these teams that have kind of fallen back towards the bottom of the pack, there's just not a lot to really highlight in a season. So it is nice to kind of go back, reflect on what 2023 meant for each of these clubs, and then look ahead to 2024. Because again, in this league, there's so much parity. If you're new to this league, you're just getting into MLS, or if you're just new to MLS a couple of years, this league's got so much parity. So getting to talk about these teams, we always get really excited, I think, Jordan, about some of these clubs. And I know the Rapids are definitely one of those teams that we'll talk about today that we're both pretty, excited to see what the product looks like on the field because of all the changes that have happened. So I'm excited to talk to our guest, but I'm most excited, Jordan, about getting the season underway. What is this now? Is this our 4th season?
I started in 2020 October. So
Okay.
then you joined in 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024.
So
Right?
4th, and this is your 5th, right?
This will be
Well,
my 5th season.
yeah.
Because we started Stoppage in 2020,
Yep.
and then at the October of 2020, I was doing the playoffs
Yep.
coverage on here. And then 2021 you joined. So yeah, we are
Okay.
looking at year 4. Holy crap. I've been
It's
I've been
wild.
in the soccer mode too right now. I finished season 2 of Welcome to Wrexham. I started the David Beckham show on Netflix, and I have the final episode of that where they're going to actually talk like Galaxy and stuff. So I'm excited to dive into that after this recording. Um, and then yesterday, watching the Miami game, which we'll kind of dive into on Thursday's episode when we go to the East. It kind of felt like old times for me, Logan, where I used to have the MLS Soccer Live thing, which was, Apple TV MLS Season Pass before MLS Season Pass. But everything was blacked out, if you're in an area. So, um, and like some of I couldn't get it on the TV, it was before they had smart apps too, a lot of times. So I was sitting there with my laptop. And since these games have been on MLSsoccer.com for the first 2 preseason games, I'm sitting there with my legs crossed on the bed with the laptop. And it felt like old times when I'm watching MLS Soccer Live or whatever. So, Felt like uh, those were crazy times because I remember watching the Europa League final that Clint Dempsey was in on Fulham on my laptop. I remember, you know, Fox Soccer Channel watching those CONCACAF Champions League games and all that. So take me back to those times. Uh, Actually, don't, because everything's a lot more easily accessible now. But it was just the budding of my soccer love back then, where I was really getting into it. So it was a great reminder of those times. All right, so I think we're ready to welcome in our guest. So let's go ahead and take a quick break and then welcome our guest. And now we welcome in Braidon Nourse from the Denver Post. How are you today, Braidon?
Not too bad. How are you, Jordan?
I'm doing well, doing well. Thank you for joining us. And if you want to quickly just tell everyone where they can find your Denver Post work and where they can follow you on socials.
Yeah, definitely. You can always go to the Denver Post, look up Braidon Nourse, BraidonNourse. You can do the same thing on Twitter. It's just my name. Yeah, that's where I post most of my work.
Awesome. So Logan, did you want to kick off with the first question here that we have about Colorado?
Yeah, and Braden, just apologies ahead. I'm sure you saw that I have a tiger. That's I have my resident cats like to. We actually had the Austin guys on last year for a preview, and they actually took down. I had a green screen behind me; it no longer goes up because my cats destroy the set. But
Okay.
yeah, no. So if I got anything going on weird behind me, just ignore it the best you can, I guess.
I have
But yeah,
cats too,
I'll
so I understand.
Yep. See, they're like keyboard mongers. I don't know what it is about the keyboard. As soon as it comes on, boom, they're right in the screen.
Yep.
But yeah, I'll start some rapid topics off, I guess, since that's why you're here. Yeah. So again, what did 2023 really mean for the Rapids? Jordan and I talked about this quite a bit extensively when Robin Fraser was let go of his position. We talked a lot about just. I mean, we started covering the league. We were talking about this too about 4 years ago on this podcast, and we got to see a Rapids team finish first in the Western Conference, and it's been a drastic dissension into the bottom of the table. Finished last in the West last year. What did 2023? I mean, can you kind of reflect on maybe some things that went wrong, some positives maybe that they took out of the season last year?
Yeah. You asked the question, what went wrong and what didn't go wrong, honestly. You started the year off with kind of an injury bug. There were times where there were 10 plus players on an injury report. And that was for like almost a couple of months straight from like early April to late May. So that was a huge thing. It forced different players to play multiple positions. I think Sam Nicholson played basically every position outside of goalkeeper. Um, and it also forced the team to try out a lot of new formations. And honestly, we couldn't tell most times if Robin was trying to do 5 out of the back or 3 out of the back with kind of hybrid wing backs. It was just a really weird kind of start to the year. Obviously, that changed when they got Andrew Gutman. He kind of solved the problems in the back line a little bit. There were a lot of goal scoring issues. They were tied with Toronto for the least goals last year. It was just honestly a hard watch whenever you watch the Rapids. But you mentioned some positives. It's hard to say. You kind of weed out. So I think the biggest positive was the fan kind of protests, and I know that doesn't seem positive at face value, but I think it did make somewhat of a difference. The C38 fan group protested. I don't know if you've seen the banners in their section. The badge the players, the fans deserve better. And then the walkout happened, where that whole section of supporters walked out in the somethingth minute of the game. And it forced ownership, and it forced the front office to kind of take stock. They came out with press releases, statements, and obviously they have been cooking this offseason.
It's funny that you say about the protests, because I feel like this is a sport that can pull that off a lot more than some of the other sports, right? Like we saw it over in Europe with the Super League stuff. We just saw it with Sporting Kansas City, forcing them to get rid of Gavin Wilkinson, and then, like you said, with Colorado last year. So um, I can see it as a positive. I can see it as a positive, just to show also just fan power.
Hmm.
I think is such a big thing. But Robin Fraser's gone. Chris Armas coming in,
Hmm.
kind of a shock signing, I guess you would say. Well, it was for me anyway, because I'm not a big Chris Armas fan. But um, what was the reaction around Denver and Colorado with the Armas signing? And are there any concerns since he kind of struggled with Red Bull and Toronto, especially Toronto?
Well, when you sent me this question over Twitter, I decided to go through and find some reactions from fans. So I got some quotes for you here. Um, Why the flying F did you hire Chris Armas?
That's a good one. I love that. Yeah.
Words cannot begin to describe how disappointed I am. Why? Absolute fraud. One embarrassing front office decision after another. So this is kind of the
Running
thought.
theme, yeah.
Yeah, you can see a theme there with what the Rapids kind of fan base thought about the hire. But now I think the page has really turned. I think people are starting to believe in him, not only because of the signings that they've made over the offseason, but one of the first things that Chris did was meet with the C38 group and kind of get an idea. I wasn't there, unfortunately, but he kind of got an idea, met with the fan group and kind of promised like, hey, this is what we want to do. This is the kind of team we want to be, which is like an attacking team who kind of presses down your throat and gets the ball back as soon as possible and as often as possible. And obviously with the signings of Georgi Mihailovic, Sam Vines, it seems like on paper they're coming through on that promise so far.
Yeah, you mentioned it. I think one of the most, at least definitely interesting, but I honestly, and personally, and I know Jordan, I think, is in the same boat. I mean, we were talking about Georgi Mihailovic as an MVP caliber player before he made his move. Zach Steffen was one of the best goalkeepers that's played in this league in a couple, 5 to 10 years. It seems like they've made some really great signings. The Armas signing was odd to me in that sense, but I guess transitioning from Armas, because I know Jordan and I are both, I don't think we kind of understand what that is all about, but kind of moving into the signings as far as the player and the personnel. Where do you kind of see this team going? They've signed Sam Vines again. I mean, this seems like a team that is resurging, and they've not done anything on the field really yet besides that preseason game today. But what kind of I guess product do you see on the field this year, and what are you looking forward to most as far as the signs are concerned, especially in Stefan and Mihailovic?
Yeah, so one thing that Pork Smith, the team president, kind of mentioned to us numerous times over like the last portion of last season and then during the off season as well, and it's kind of been a theme of his tenure at GM and as president, is that they are really interested in younger players that can run forever. And I think Chris Armas kind of has the same kind of viewpoint. So now they're obviously together. They get to make these phone calls with all the players they're signing, and it feels like there's more harmony there. And especially with Stefan and Mihailovic, they were guys that kind of they did really good in MLS, like you said. They went off to Europe. Their tenures were kind of a little disappointing in terms of the hope that they had going into Europe. Stefan had a knee injury at Middlesbrough. But yeah, I think both of those signings are in the right direction for what the club wants their product to be.
All right. Well, how about any of the signings other than Stefan and Mihailovic? Is there any one, and I guess you could kind of say without Vines too, just because he's somebody that's been there previously. Is there any big signing or anything that you see as making a big impact this year in 2024? Like any other name other than Stefan and Mihailovic that jumps out?
Yeah, the one that stands out to me, and it was one of the first moves that they made once Armas was hired, was Omir Fernandez. He's a younger kind of winger, played at Red Bulls with Armas. They were both super excited to be reunited. And now that they have Vines, I'm really excited to what they can do on the left side. I think Omir's kind of a guy that will do whatever you tell them to do. And I think other than a few guys last year, they kind of lacked that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as far as improvement, over last year, what are you really excited? Like when you're looking forward into 2024 and you're looking at the Rapids, I'm assuming that most fans would go, yeah, we're definitely not going to finish bottom of the West again. But realistically, I mean, what are we looking at as far as the Rapids are concerned? Are there big holes that, you know, the team's kind of missing players in? Like what can we expect as far as improvement this year going forward into the season?
So the two major things that need to still happen this offseason, if possible, is they need to get a good six, which is something that has supposed to have happened by now. They've been in talks. I know that we're kind of just waiting on someone to sign. We're not privy to know who is in discussion with who, which is fine. But they went out and got Jasper Loffelson from Real Salt Lake, and I
Mm-hmm.
think he's good enough to start, but we know that they want to do better at that position. And with that too, it allows Cole Bassett to play a more comfortable position. It allows Connor Ronan to play a little further up the pitch, and be more comfortable in his role. So that's definitely something that needs to be addressed still. And then the other thing would be depth. So pretty top heavy team right now, with the starters. Not a whole lot of depth, other than Jasper Loffelson if they do bring in a better six. But yeah, those are my major concerns right now.
Awesome. Well, the question that we usually like to end it with here on all of these is something that we like to look back on, and we will next year at the end of the season, is what is a successful season for the Rapids this year? You know, like what are fans, you could say expectations, but like if they finish like, right in a playoff spot, is that a
Mhm.
success for them? Or do they think this team can be, better than that?
Yeah, so I asked Porksmith this, at media days, and he told me that, like every team, their goal is to win the cup, and to do that, you have to make the playoffs. So their minimum expectation is to make the playoffs. I think their ceiling, barring any major shifts in terms of injuries or surprise movements or anything like that, I think their ceiling should be a home field advantage for a playoff series in the first round.
Hmm.
And their absolute floor would have to be scraping into the playoffs. And I think the kind of idea around the club is that it's basically unacceptable to not be playing in November.
Okay. That makes sense. I feel like that should be honestly every team's goal.
Yeah.
With how many teams get into the playoffs, I feel like that should be a goal. But
Hmm.
good to hear that, especially that you actually spoke with, people from the club about that, because sometimes I feel like people will dodge the expectation, because then it's putting something on the team there. But Logan, anything else before we wrap it up with Braden?
Yeah, I think I just had one like random off question, but it's one thing that we're doing kind of as a fun thing to give kind of our report card from last year, and I just wondered, Braden, it might be easy. This might be an easy grade here, or you can kind of you can play at the club side if you really want. But if you were to give a grade to them last year, what would that be?
An F plus, because
Yeah, I love
I
that.
hate I hate giving an F because it
Yeah,
could always be worse. So I'll
that's
say
true.
D minus to F plus.
That's good, Jordan. We had to steal that from Brit. That was a pretty good one. I like that.
I wrote down F on mine, so I'll share that when we finish up here. But yeah, so we're close to the same here, but you gave them a little bit more wiggle room. Well, thank you again, Braden, for coming on here. Can you just let everyone know where to find you again?
Yeah, so the Denver Post, you can search up my name for all my work. You can honestly just go to the Rapids page on the Denver Post. Most of that stuff's going to be mine. So you can do that, or you can go on Twitter, search up my name. It's just first and last name on there, and that's where I post most all of my work.
Awesome. And that was Braidon Nourse from the Denver Post. Everyone, please go follow him and keep up with his work. I think Colorado's got a great chance to have so many fun storylines to keep track of throughout the season. And just want to thank him again for coming on. And hopefully we get him back on here throughout the course of the season. Logan, he said F plus. I said F. Where do you kind of land on this report card for 2023?
Yeah, so we talked to him about being in school, finishing up his last semester. I think that was before he got on air. So I think he knows best, right? I think he's probably more used to the grading scale right now than as it currently stands. And sorry,
You
my
were a
cat.
teacher though, so
I was a teacher, yes. Seems like a long time ago, but yeah, no. But I think Jordan Braidon is, I would say, pretty dead on. I would give him an F. I'm not going to go the F plus because I'm not sure it could have got much worse. I mean, maybe
I
in
could
the
see
sense
where
of
he
like,
look. I
yeah,
could see if he's like it's an F if they kept Robin Fraser and if they didn't listen to fans. I could
yeah,
see that, right?
okay,
The
yeah,
fact that they took those steps, I can see why he's giving the F plus D minus because it shows that they're willing. And you know what? I really like Logan that his answer about what's a successful season was not just a guess. It was
yeah,
something he's talked to the guy about, and they said we want to win the cup, and that means we have to get in the playoffs. So
yes,
if I'm drawing the line, and I wrote this in our notes so we can come back to it in a year because we
hmm.
haven't been good at doing that in previous
No, we haven't. No,
seasons. So
forget
I
it.
wrote it in this document that we're never going to erase. This document lives forever.
Yeah,
Is playoffs is what is successful. So if we come back around and we're grading them next year and they don't make the playoffs, that's like another F, right? I mean, unless they look good, then it's maybe a D. So I think now it's great that we have like a baseline to kind of judge them off of. That's coming from the club's mouth, and I quite like that.
yeah. No, you make a great point. I loved. I do too. I love that Braden was able to get that out of the ownership and the GM, or I think it was GM that
Yeah,
said it. I
yeah.
can't remember who said it. But he asked, and that's a direct. That is such a direct question to ask, and I love that. Like that's a great question, and what an honest answer. Like most, like you said, most GMs are going to skirt that, right? They're going to say, well, obviously, we want to win. That's where I thought he was going to stop. I thought he was going to stop with the generic. Well, obviously, MLS Cup or bust, right? Basically, that's not realistic, and we know that going into things. I would say that this team is realistic. Like I feel like this is realistic.
They're bringing back Sam Vines, Cole
Yes.
Bassett. These are players that they had on the team back when they were like in 2021, right? When they
Yeah.
were the best in the West. They still have Keegan Rosenberry. They're adding Zach Steffen in goal. I mean, it is something that I think when we're looking at it, it is a possibility, especially with
Yeah.
how many get in.
Georgie Mihailovic. Like,
And yeah, I
yeah.
mean, if I'm looking at this, what I would say is more than playoffs. For me, a successful season would be not the wild card, right? Like you don't want to be the wild card teams. While you might say, well, that's like an increase of 5 or 6 places. That's good. Right now, just from the names on the team, I feel like it should be higher, but I'm sure they'll take just getting in at this point and then hopefully growing next year in 2025 off of that momentum. But I'm excited for Colorado. This is a
Me
team
too.
that is an unsexy team, not a team that you're usually watching on Saturday nights, but I could see myself turning on some of these Colorado games.
They've got a guy that easily could have finished in the MVP race had he finished the season. I think that was last year, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Cole Bassett came back and finished out the season with them last year. He was easily one of the best prospects coming out of MLS. Zach Steffen, he's like I said, he was the number one goalkeeper. Arguably, Matt Turner was here like before, like after, like it was that transition. It was Zach Steffen and then Matt Turner. So like to get that, I mean, and again, Jordan, I think where this goes wrong though for them, I do not like the Chris Armas signing. I do not this is where I have some major hesitancy because
Yeah.
we've done this before. We've done this same rodeo where he went to, well, he was in New York and then he went to Jordan. He went to Toronto and lasted a year. Like not even. It was abysmal what he did in Toronto. So that's my hesitancy. But man, do they have a stacked roster.
Yeah, and I think that is the hesitancy is Chris Armas. But Chris Armas did do well at Red Bulls at times. I feel like
Yeah.
it could be good, right? Like we'll see how it goes. All right, let's move on to LA Galaxy because they finished second to bottom in the West. So they finished with 36 points, and they've had a lot of turnover in their positions here as they lose Chicharito. They end up losing Douglas Costa, Raheem Edwards, Preston Judd, Tyler Boyd, Jonathan Klinsman, Calvin Leardom, Yuri Rosell, Michael Barrios, Billy Sharp, tons of people. Now, not like huge names, obviously, but so it kind of goes to stand with if we're looking back at 2023, right? And I'm looking at where they finished in 2023, and I'm going back and looking at where they finished in 2022. They finished ninth league wide in MLS in 2022 and fourth in the West. To go from that to second bottom of the West is absolute craziness. I feel like we're going to be really harsh to these bottom five teams. I'm sorry, that is a F. The lowest grade you can give them. What is it? F minus? What's the lowest I can go here? Because a 0
Yeah.
to go from fourth to
You have to repeat the grade. You have to repeat the grade.
Yeah, you have to repeat 2023. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
When you have,
they will.
I don't think they will. But
I don't know.
This is look. We just had an episode about the MLS Mount Rushmore, and I was thinking back to those great teams.
Yep.
LA Galaxy. I'm about to watch this David Beckham documentary's last episode.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to show them going to get David Beckham. Yes, they got Chicharito. He was oft injured, but when he was fine, he was playing well. But the rest of the team, Chicharito is like a target forward. If the rest of the team's not humming, he's not going to score. So to go from fourth to 13th is an absolute travesty when you are the LA Galaxy, 5-time MLS Cup winner, a dynasty in what decade do we call that? The 2010s? In that decade, it's absolutely mind-boggling. And I've come on here, I've defended Vanny. This is his last shot. I'm sorry. Greg, Vanny, this is your last shot. You have a new GM, Will Kuntz, that we're going to talk about here. And so we have a new GM. He's bringing in players. He has connections. He was at LAFC, who built a good team over there. They have to do, but I have to give them like a F minus, whatever lowest I can go. That is what LA Galaxies is, and that's going to sound harsh because it's going to be a lower grade than what Colorado got. But Colorado, when they were first place in 2021, I did not believe in them. Then they slowly fell in 2022, and they fell further in 2023. My expectations were not high. LA Galaxy, they signed Zlatan at one point. Like, they need to be in the top of the West. I mean, El Traficos are so boring right now. I mean, they're usually good still, but there's no storyline there because LA Galaxy sucks. It just sucks.
Yeah, and Jordan, I think you're right in giving them an F minus, and people argue, well, you guys are rating. How is that possible if the Rapids finished under them? And I think Braidon made a good point when we talked about the Rapids, where he said that when the fans protested the ownership and the GM, and they sat down and collectively with the fans with the idea going forward that they needed to be better. It seems like the Galaxy aren't interested in that, Jordan. It's really strange. Like, their ownership groups, I think,
been in there. Thank God they did listen to fans about Chris Klein. They did eventually do that, right. But it felt very like last resort.
It's a fractured relationship. The fans there in LA are like, this team, Jordan, I think it will take at least 5 years for this team to be better than LAFC is currently, which is really scary to say. Like, I really do think LAFC is the favorite out of LA for a very long time. I don't think that it's going to get any better anytime soon. They haven't made the big splashes. They have DP spots that are open. Chicharito leaves. Douglas Costa, who was one of their better players last year, he's gone. Tyler Boyd scored one of the, it just seems like this team is just, they're so okay with mediocrity, right? And I think that's a big problem. I'm looking back at these years, Jordan, league ranking. So out of the 28 to 29 teams, depending on what year I'm talking about, maybe 27, 26 as we go further. Jordan, their best finish in the last like decade. I'm looking back to 2015. Okay, so not quite a decade. Their best finish since 2015, league ranked was sixth in 2016. Jordan, they finished 22nd. They were the 22nd best team in 2017. In 2018, they were 13th. In 2019, they were the 8th. In 2020, they were the 22nd. In 2021, the 15th. 2022, the 9th. 2023, Jordan, they finished the 26th best team in MLS. Like, this is not an MLS big market team that, like, I get NYCFC and Red Bull. Like, I get it. They enjoyed their success. It was very short lived. It seems like it's done. LA Galaxy, man, this is a historic club, and whatever's happening, I just don't get. And they're not getting better. Like, you and I could argue about that, but I don't think they're getting. I think they're worse. I really do. I think they're worse this year. And Greg Vanny, this is it. Like, I'm calling it. He'll be done, and this will be the final year for Greg Vanny. Like, this is not a great look from what he really had success in Toronto.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think if you're Kuntz, you're like, look, you got this year because Chris Klein wasn't really doing it for you, so let's see what you can do with what I can bring. And what is he bringing so far? Well, he's got Miguel Berry, right? They went out and got Miguel Berry. He used to play for Crew, DC, and Atlanta. He's kind of a journeyman now, right? 26 years old, 11 goals and 3 assists in 75 games. John Nelson, from FC Dallas, Cincinnati, and St. Louis. 71 games, 46 starts. John McCarthy, I do like this. I like him leaving LAFC and going to LA Galaxy. I know a lot of Union fans were really pushing for a Union to try to sign John McCarthy again as a backup. And then who is Mikey Yamane?
Miki Yamane, maybe?
Miki Yamane, yeah, a Japanese international right back from the J1 league side, Kawasaki Frontale. So that's their biggest signing, right? Because these other ones are depth signings. Now, of course, if you look at their, their forwards, you still got Joveljic up there. You got the trade that they did with Diego Fagundes from Austin. You have Ricky Puig still.
Jalen Neal's good at left center back.
Yeah,
Young
yeah,
player if he's healthy.
yeah. I mean, their defense looks pretty. Mavinga and Zavaleta still. I mean, like they got some good defense back there, but it's really my question is where the goals coming from. It's not Joveljic. If Joveljic is not scoring, where are they coming from? Because
He did
I don't
last
think
year.
Barry's going to score a ton of goals. I don't even know how much game time he gets. So, yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I think that they'll still make some signings. I want them to make that big splash
Big
signing in the
splash.
summer that
Yep.
they used to. Where is the Zlatan? Where's the Chicharito? Where is the David Beckham and Robbie Keane?
Mhm.
That's what I'm looking for. You're LA. You have the same city as LAFC. So if they can draw people like Hugo Lloris for cheap, 350K, and they got Hugo Lloris just because he's living in LA, then you should be
Yeah.
able to do the same thing. So let's go, Galaxy. Let's get some big signings in here. Where do you want to go next with that? With this club? Anything else, or are we like what should we go into what expectations should be for this season, or are you still want to talk about some of these changes?
I missed the signing because I forgot that he was traded. Looking back at the depth chart, and I literally listened to him interview. I like the Diego Fagundez signing. I think that he was good in Austin. I think Austin fizzled out last year, so that's kind of why he was null and void last year because they're
Yeah.
just Austin's in, and we'll get to them, but Austin's kind of in a rebuild mode. Yeah, I don't know, Jordan. I think you're right. Give up on the Carlos Vela idea. He's not coming to the Galaxy. There's no chance in hell. He'll
Yeah,
go back to
Tom Bogert
Mexico,
said that is made
right?
up. He
Yeah,
said that today. So
yeah,
there you go, everyone. That was just not ever going to happen.
yeah. And I'm
He's
sorry,
still
but
in
that
talks
is
with LAFC.
if Jordan, that's like their big highlight too. Like that's who they wanted. If that's who you want, like Carlos Vela of 2 years ago, 3 years ago, maybe. But now, man, Carlos Vela doesn't play that much. Like again, this is it's wild, Jordan. I wish I got to see the Galaxy in their prime. You know what? I really do
Go back
because
and watch them. You can watch some of
I
the old
have to.
games. You
Yeah,
have you have to go back and watch some of those MLS Cup finals because
yeah.
they are as much as I didn't want them to win some of these things. Watching Robbie
Mm-hmm.
Keane play with Beckham and Donovan is just such a treat. It really is.
Yeah, El Trafico's turned into more of a wreck. Like
Yeah, it's not traffic
it's
anymore.
not
It's
great.
El
Yeah.
Reco.
Jordan, yeah. So expectations for 2024. Where do you? I mean, I think you give them a little bit. I think you do. I'm a little bit more harsh. I tend to shoot myself in the foot because I overreact sometimes. But realistically, where? I mean, what's a good season for this team? Like, I just don't see it.
The history of this club. A good season is make the playoffs. A great season is okay, let's say this. A good season is playoffs, no wild card. A great season is top 4. A fantastic season is winning the cup.
Mm-hmm.
What is a successful season? I'll go wild card. After you just missed the playoffs this year, if this is Vanny's last time on I would assume it is. I wish we had somebody on here for LA Galaxy too, because maybe we're just being harsh as outsiders, but I feel like they will be even harsher if they're insiders. Nothing's good happened. I mean, the closest they got was that 4th place. Before that, they still struggled to make the playoffs at times, right? So in this case, I would say a successful season is make the playoffs because that's the ultimate goal. You make the playoffs, anything can happen, right? Like literally less now with the best of 3, I guess, but anything can happen when you make the playoffs. So that's successful. But it shouldn't be for this club. This club should be aiming top 4, top 5 every single year. We should be pushing for MLS Cup. We should be trying to rival what LAFC is doing right now. And that's just not where they are right now. So what I would say is success, playoffs. If they don't make the playoffs again, they've missed so many times the last 5 years, the playoffs. They gotta. Since Zlatan never played in the playoffs, I don't think, if I remember correctly. His 2 years here, whatever, they missed. So it's got to be playoffs or bust, and if not, then they have to really. Now Kuntz might still be building up the team and stuff, but I think you'll need a new manager in.
Yeah. I mean, I was sitting there as you were talking to, and you were talking about wild card, and I'm like, man, that's a stretch. But then I'm looking at the Western Conference, Jordan, and this is something that I think we'll start to talk to more now that we've got another team to compare against the Rapids. The Rapids got better, right? But I'm looking above them in Austin, Minnesota, and Portland, and we'll get to them next. But spoiler alert, I think there's one team in that mix that might be better than the Galaxy right now. If they make a good splash, right? They've got 2 DP spots open. A number 9 is essential. They cannot win with Jovic up there. It's just not going to happen. He's not proven that he can do it at a clip that they need. I thought he was going to, Jordan. He really did score quite a bit when Chicharito would be hurt. But I'm looking at the Western Conference, Jordan. this thing's a mess. Like, I have no idea. Like, this
The
might
West
be.
is not what it was.
It's wild.
It's fallen off in the last 2 years.
It's
This used to
wild.
be the
Like,
premier conference.
it's insane. Whereas I can go in the Eastern Conference and go, those teams are deep or getting deeper. Like, yikes. So yeah, no, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go like what you said. I think getting that, even sneaking into the playoffs at the ninth wild card spot, is a successful season for them. Like you said, a fantastic season would be winning the cup. Great season, that home field advantage in the top four. A good season making the playoffs. Like, you live with that, unless those are just not your expectations. But I, I'm thinking that this team has a shot. I do. I think they've got a shot. They need a number 9. They need better defense. They were one of the worst defenses last year. They've got good experienced defenders, but they're older. Like, it just doesn't
Yeah.
seem to work. Jalen Neal needs to stay healthy. Chris Mavinga can't do it anymore. We figured that out in Toronto. Like, it does. It needs to get better. I'm just not sure it's there. Like, they've got the money. They've got the resources. It just blows my mind that they can't figure this out. They should not be a bottom tier in the
And if
Western
they
Conference.
somehow don't have the money, it's like, what did you do with the money you got from all of the Beckham merch and stuff?
Yeah.
Like, come on, right? Like, you were the team.
Yes.
There was a while where like that was the team everybody wanted to be on.
One question
All
for
right.
you before we
Yeah.
move on. Fractured relationship with the fans. How do they fix it? Can they fix it?
Win.
Yeah.
That's how you fix it. Look, people might say otherwise, but really, winning fixes everything. Do you know why they didn't like Chris Klein that much? He didn't win.
Yeah. Yeah.
The team was not good under him. So if he came in and won them like 5 MLS Cups as a GM or president of soccer operations or whatever, then they would like him a bit more, right? And if they kept bringing in good signings and stuff, they would like him. He didn't win enough. He came in right at the tail end of their run, and then the team sucked, and that is what it is. All right, let's move on to Austin. They were third bottom of the West. This is a team that made the playoffs in 2022. They did not make the playoffs in 2023. Just absolute fall off for Austin. I don't know. Did we see this coming? I have West predictions. Logan definitely didn't see it coming.
I got blindsided.
I had them as third. You had them as first, and they finished 12th. That is rough. That's pretty rough. Yeah. Austin. Then they also had the whole crazy thing over their head in 2023 with the Claudio Reyna stuff, right? Because that happened in the offseason of the World Cup in 2022, going into 2023. And then now I feel like they do have some sort of foundation here. But if I had to give them a report card grade for 2020, hold on, let me write this down. Report card. Jordan. Okay. I have to give them a D-, right? When you go from having a fantastic season the way they did to third bottom of the West, there's not much else you can do. And the only reason it's not an F is because I feel like I've given 2 Fs already. So I have no more Fs to give. So I'm giving a D.
Neither do they.
Here. So I know there was probably some extenuating circumstances with all that stuff, but it's the fans don't care. The fans don't care what the circumstances are. They thought they were going to make that leap forward in 2022, and they did. And then they thought 2023, what's next? We want to win the thing. And they end up like the furthest you can from winning the thing. It's just that Colorado and Galaxy were even worse.
Yeah, let's put this in perspective. I'm going D- as well, because I think there are at least some pieces that they have left that I think going forward they can work with. And I think there's some bright lights. But the one thing that really stood out to me, Jordan, is, and we talked about this happening, and it happened. Sebastian Giroud was basically a player cut in half. He scored 11 goals, right? He had 22 the year before that. Was thrown in there as candidacy for the MVP. Hani Mukhtar has just been phenomenal. This would be the comparison. If somebody wants to understand and watch Nashville more than they watch Austin, this would be like Hani Mukhtar having half the quality of year that he always has. What would happen in Nashville? Same thing.
Yeah,
I
they
think it
blow
would
up.
blow up, right? But the flip side, Nashville's better defensively, way better, way more sound, better at home. Like it just Jordan's team. This is the team also that's battling teams that they shouldn't even be battling. Was that CONCACAF Champions League? Was that when they about lost to? That was the year before that, right? I can't
Uh,
remember what year that was.
no,
Why
that
is that?
was last year because they qualified
Yeah,
for
they
it
can
due to their
qualify. That's
high
right.
placement,
So it had to been
but
last
they
year.
got blown out by like a
They got beat
very
by
low
like people,
level team.
right? Right? They got beat
Um,
by people they had to like fix off. They got off the streets or something.
I don't think that's what happened. I think they were talking about like, oh, we don't have enough players, but
Yeah.
I do think. Let's see, where was it? Austin lost to Violetta
Yes, that's what it was.
of
I couldn't remember the team's name.
Haiti.
Yeah.
They lost to a professional Haitian team. That's
Yeah.
not typical. They lost 3-0 in the first leg and then had to come out and lost and won 2-0 in the next leg, but they ended up losing. And that's what they shouldn't lose, right?
No. No, I don't
That's
care
when
if
you
it's your
shouldn't
first
lose.
experience. No.
Haiti is not usually a football haven, and you're a team that was like in the top half of the table in the West the year before. But it was kind of an omen because that starts the season and the Champions League. And I think people were kind of shocked when the CONCACAF Champions League happens and that happens, and then it was kind of an omen for the rest of the year.
Yeah, if you look back at the advanced stats, Sebastian Driussi dropped back to the regression to the mean. Like this is what a Sebastian Driussi typically will produce, and I think that going forward, that is that player, right? He is a good player. He is a very good player in this league. I don't think he's Hani Mukhtar level. I don't think he's Emmanuel Reynoso level. Like I don't think he's Carles Heel level. I think he's a good player, and that's what happens in this league. If you do not have a starlet, which I don't think they don't have, and I don't think they've got interest in finding it. Hello, cat in the back. To add Jazzy Zardes, Jordan, you and I were like really intrigued by this move because we thought maybe this is it. Sebastian on the end of the ball. If Jazzy can get 10,
Zardes was at Columbus.
Yeah.
Josh Wolf had been the assistant at Columbus. I was like, maybe they can get Jazzy back to what he was. No, it just didn't. It just didn't work.
Here's my favorite thing, Jordan. Austin's cross ratio percentages that the ball's passed in through on a cross, 48.4%. It's the highest in the league. No one else last year was over 42.5%. So that's 6 more percent that they're putting the ball in the air. And the odds of you scoring off a cross are tremendously low. Which is why teams that are good with set pieces become extremely good and valuable because they can finish those, as well as just getting their heads to the ball. But who are they getting that to? There's not an aerial. Nobody on that team strikes me as an aerialist. Like I don't find anybody that's going to. Diego Fagundes wasn't going to jump above all and smash some headers in the back net. Jazzy Zardes is not a tremendous athlete. I mean, he's way more athletic than I, but just speaking in general sense of most strikers who are athletic, who are going to win the ball in the air, like he's not one of them. So
it's not Wando.
No, he's not. Nobody's Wando. 171, baby. But yeah, I think it was just a matter of time, right?
This other stat you have here about it is crazy. That the only other team in the TAM era to be over 45% was the 2020 LA Galaxy, who weren't great. Yeah. And that you have to go back to 2014 Chivas USA to find one with a higher cross ratio than the 48.4. That's insane. Crazy.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a disaster. And I mean, really, they never looked like Jordan. I was waiting for them. You and I kept doing the thing where we're like, oh, maybe this is the week, or they're starting to get. Yeah. No, it never happened. So.
Yeah, after Leagues Cup, right? You have this written down. They went 0 wins, 5 losses, 3 draws.
Yeah.
That is awful.
Yeah,
And they didn't do well in Leagues Cup, so it's not even like they went deep
right.
to be exhausted enough, So I don't know. I'm not very. I guess if we turn the page to 2024, right? Like you said, they need a number 9. Um, they've been linked with Miguel Borja, right?
Yeah, River Plate,
Yeah, from
good
River
forward,
Plate.
really good forward.
Um, so you asked this great question here: is it closer to a retool or a rebuild?
Hmm.
For my opinion, it's probably a retool. I feel like rebuild would be like they'd be selling off Jerusi. They'd be selling off
Yeah,
a bunch of their players to then kind of cut costs and then try to restart. But they don't. But since they're not doing that, I feel like they're like, all right, we have a little bit of retooling we can do, and I think that's all it takes in MLS. I don't think in MLS you ever have to like do a tank job, right? One, because the draft isn't valuable, but you can turn it around quick. We were just talking about Colorado being the worst team in the West, and we're feeling pretty good about them because they made like 3 key signings. If Austin can do something like that, then they can turn this around as a retool.
yeah, they're going to add Roto Boreal, Borel, sorry. And I think you and I talked about this at some point. I can't remember
They
where we
announced it
talked
like
about this.
during the season, I think,
Yeah.
and we talked about it then. But yeah, he's coming from Manchester City.
Hmm. And he dealt with player development. He was in their front office. He around the as a City fan around the City faithful, kind of looking at different reactions to it. He knows what he's doing. It's great scouting, great development, great at getting young players up into the leagues. So I think this is an exciting signing for them. Uh, I think it's got more direction than Claudio Reyna had. I think Claudio was more of just brute force and try to get as many good players on paper as he could. And I think that's where it kind of blows up. They had all sorts of center back issues last year. I remember there was a whole span there with like 3 injuries, or one
It
was
also blows
suspended. And
up when start blackmailing the Federation of U.S. Soccer and then get fired from that, or have to
yeah,
resign in disgrace.
yeah. Um, the reason why the D minus, like going into 2024, the reason why I was excited, you still have Sebastian Derusi, who's a very good player, right? Owen Wolf, I think he's an exciting young player. I think there's a lot of skill there. I think he's one of the more impressive younger players. You can kind of throw in some of the other young players around the league that he's not quite better than, like a Noel Buck or a Kramashi, but he's in that conversation, right? He's in that, he's going to be a really impressive 8. I think in this league until they do sell him off. Josh Wolf, I think I don't think you can do better there for now, right? I think that there are coaches on that coaching carousel that you don't want. Maybe Geo, but like I don't know. It seems like they're in a good spot with both Wolves, the son and dad. But Danny Perea, I think that he's a good player. Um, I feel like he's close to being one of the top defensive center mids, or could get to that level. So that's exciting. Brad Stuver is probably one of the best goalkeepers in the league. And then John Gallagher, who I think is a really good attacking fullback. So you've got really good stuff. Jader O'Brien, or I think it's Yader O'Brien. I always got that mixed up when he played with Dallas. But he had 17 goals and 13 assists in 94 games. I think that's a decent option, a good depth piece. If he does start, then that'll work. But Guilherme Biro is who they added, primarily left back, had 3 goals and 4 assists in 115 matches as a left back. And they liked the way that he looked in Brazil, had a good breakout year last year. So I think promising things going forward in 2024. But Jordan, I don't know. This West is so interesting to me, and with DP spots possibly open and not open, like this is a weird team because they've got Alex Ring on that DP spot that the contract, which I never understood, besides paying him more. But for a guy especially that won't frequent as much as he used to, so I don't know. I don't know what the outlook is on this team, and maybe I'll pitch it back over to you to kind of like, what are your expectations? Because I feel like this team's kind of all over the place right now, and not really a pinpoint on how they will do.
Well, I will say I like the Stephon Cleveland signing a lot. I think he'll be a good backup in the league. A successful season for this club it's got to be playoffs, right? I know that's probably going to be answer for most of these, but especially in the West, I feel like since this team is a lot of the teams that are knocked out of the playoffs right now are former teams that were in the playoffs. So I feel like the only success you can have is getting back in there, right? Like this team to be so high in 2022 and then to crash down in 2023, the only way it can be a success is if you show 2023 was an outlier and show, boom. It's not like one of these gradual regrowth processes that we look at sometimes. Like at one point, I think for Cincy, we just said, don't get the wooden spoon again, right? Because they'd gotten it 3 years in a row.
Mm-hmm.
This is a team that should be at least fighting for that wild card spot. But again, there's a question on can they rebound from was 2022 the outlier is kind of the question we're going to be facing going forward, right? So I think it has to be wild card. And I feel like most of the ones I'm going to be saying, that's going to be like bare minimum because there's 14 teams in the Western Conference. 9 get into the wild card, like the playoffs. To me, like you should be able to leapfrog from they were 12th. That means they should have to go up 3 spots. They just have to get 3 spots higher to get into the playoffs. So yeah, that's where I have to stay. That's where I have to say for Austin.
Yeah, I think a successful year. Honestly, I think that their aspirations should be higher because last year needs to be proven that it's not the norm.
Yeah,
That
ideally you
year,
want to be like
right?
5th,
Yeah,
right? But successful, I put 9th.
yeah, successful. I'm going to go ninth as well. I don't eighth or ninth because I think they've got good bones, a good structure for some of the players there. It really it's so confusing because Alex Ring won't play. Let's see, how many games did he play last year? Because let me see. So he played in 28, right? Started 25. It's so strange to me. Like, and Orlando City did it, so maybe it's not as strange. But to pay a player to be a DP spot and take up one of those big DP spots, where I think Ring's kind of on that back end of his career. Like, I feel like he's starting to kind of show the wear and tear of being in the league for so long, and they're stuck in that spot. And then you've got Rigoni and you've got Derusi. So those are your 3 spots. You can't get anybody else. Can you pay one of them off to get off one of those spots? Maybe you just did it to Ring and you paid him more, so you made him a DP. Like it's mind boggling to me. Some of the decisions that were made before the new cast came in. But yeah, I like this team a lot more, I will say, than some of the teams that we're going to cover here in the future and this episode and probably next. But
this is the team that you are referring to as better than the Galaxy.
Yes. This is the team that I think is set up to move forward if they make the right additions. But we'll see. I don't know what that looks like, but I guess we'll find out because they're going to need a lot more. And they don't have any big spots to really try to fill. And Jazzy Zardes that's the issue, I think. That's one of the big issues. He's not it. So I don't know what they do there. But yeah. Expectations.
Incoming 30-goal season for Jazzy Zardes.
Sure. And that would bring them all the way to the top of the league because Messi would never be able to touch him.
All right, let's look at Minnesota. What would you grade Minnesota for 2023? Because I'll tell you right up front, I have D+. And the plus comes from getting rid of Adrian Heath finally. Who we've been calling for a while. Because, again, this is another team that was... they were playoffs in 2022, right? Unless if I'm forgetting a year, but if not, like 2020, they were in the semifinals. Like, they just keep going further and further backwards when we're looking at them. But 2023, they finished, 21st in the league.
Yeah, last year
They
they made,
finished,
or the year before that, they made the playoffs, sixth
yeah,
spot.
2022, they finished 11th in the
Yeah.
whole league and finished sixth, which was at that point second to bottom of the playoffs before before they ended up doing the other thing, the wild card. But they lost to Dallas in the round on penalties to go to the conference semifinals. So before, they were kind of going on this upward trajectory, because in 2021 they they were kind of around the same spot in 2021, but let me see, they finished fifth. All right, and then they lost to Portland in the first round. So that's really been the start of the slide for them, because, like I said, 2020, they reached the semis, and they were leading in that game before they ended up losing to Seattle, for Seattle to make it to the MLS Cup final, where they lost to Columbus. And that was it. They really started. Then you go like, all right, 2 first-round knockouts to immediately out of the playoffs in 2023, where they don't even qualify for them. That is a slide that they had their shot. 2020 was their year. If they didn't win it that year, I understand them in 2021 coming back with Adrian Heath, but getting bounced in the first round. And then, I mean, his contract was actually up in 2022. Remember, I was in Salt Lake, and we were doing podcast then, and it looked dire for them. They were out of the playoff spot. They did get in, but we were all like, why? Like, this is it, right? His contract's up there. It's going to part ways. And then we come back and he gets an extension, and we're like, what? And then they fire him the 1 year into the extension. All of that made no sense. And then maybe I could dock him back to a D, because the D plus was getting rid of Adrian Heath. But you know what the rest of the bad grade is too? They don't have a coach.
Yeah.
They name an interim coach who then leaves, and they're on their second interim coach.
Yeah.
And the person that they hired to take over for the, whatever you want to call it, director of football, GM.
Yeah.
Each one has like their own different name. He is currently still at his club and will not come over until, I believe, after the club season.
Yeah.
And he's the one that's going to hire the coach. So that's why they don't have a coach. What? None of this makes any sense. Why are you hiring somebody that's not going to be able to step in right away? I don't know. I think this is all a mess, and is a team that I can see really even backsliding even more.
Yeah. Looking at 2023, giving them a grade, I'd say D plus. And the fact that I love the fact that you said getting rid of Adrian Heath was probably the biggest positive come out of last year, because it 100% was. I have to agree with you on that, D plus, because Adrian Heath's gone. And they kind of did this without, some of these big stars that they have. Robin Blood was injured last season. Everybody on the roster pretty much spent time on the bench. There were a lot of players that didn't play all 34 games. I think Hassani Dotson was the only player to play 34 matches last year for them. There's a lot of missed time, and there were a lot of players that were brought in that I think are good fits. I think Pookie's interesting, right? We didn't get to see too much of him, but what we did see of him, we saw 10 goals in 14 matches played. If he continues that, Jordan, he's going to be in the conversation for one of the best players in this league. Can he keep that up? Maybe. Emmanuel Reynoso, when he did come back from his whatever the hell he did, vacation, we don't know. I think people speculated it was criminal. People speculated contract. People speculated he was homesick. I don't think it ever came out, but he almost did it again this year. He showed up late at the preseason, but he is with the team. The team did confirm to release a statement, which shows you how much pressure they were under last year. This team last year, again, had too many things going on. Adrian Heath supposedly had really close relationships with not only the coaching staff that he had, but also people outside the coaching staff and the media, but also the GM. Like, this guy's attached to everybody, and I think that's why he's kept the job for so long. It's interesting. I read an article that said the only person that had a longer leash was Peter Vermees in Kansas City, and boy, does he have a leash. So, yeah, Adrian Heath is a disaster. I've seen it in Orlando. You and I talked about it. Like, why was he still in Minnesota? It became a running joke, I think. We were talking about how you laminate that stuff and put it in the
Yeah.
locker room, and it just, he cares too much about what other people think. He's got no business, I don't think, being in the locker room. He seems like a nice guy, but that doesn't really get you very far. But yeah, no, I think looking at this team with the new signings that they have made, as far as coaching staff, so they don't have, like you said, the Cameron Knowles is actually going to be leading the team. He's the second interim coach. They have Al Ahmad, who's coming over from Barnsley. So once Barnsley's season's over, that's when he's going to come over. Then he's going to have. So then, Jordan, does he have like this extensive look at what a coach would look like? So basically, Cameron Knowles is the coach for the year, because these coaches search takes months usually.
I guess one could come in the summer, but what if Minnesota's top? I don't think they will be, right? But I mean, then you're like, well, the interim's killing it. Like, do I just leave it as,
well, maybe Cameron kills it. I don't know. But they've got exciting players. Like, they really do. Dane St. Clair didn't play very well last year.
Pookie is so much fun.
Yes, Pookie's a blast. St. Clair could be one of the top goalkeepers if he would just get over the hump. He's just not been that player yet. Kevin
Wayne.
Yeah, Kervin Arriaga, like Reynoso, Lud. Lud was like a star player before he got hurt. Last couple of years, he's been great. Yeah, like they've got some really interesting pieces. I just don't know. Like, I feel like with all the stuff going on off the pitch, like, I feel like that's a big distraction. Whatever Reynoso's doing too, that's a distraction. Even though he's been good, like, that's just what he's doing, where he operates on whatever he wants to do. The minute that he can't do what he wants to do, and I don't know what the personal reasons are that he's missing. Maybe they're important, and it might be mental health, but I don't know. Like, it just seems like they're just letting him do whatever he wants, and I think the club's you got to feel that as a player, no matter what it is. Like, what's going on? So I don't know. This team, it's messy. It's too messy right now to kind of.
No, messy is Thursday when we talk.
Oh, that's God. You're right. But right? Am I wrong? Like, this team is hard to kind of put a finger on. Because
I think if they had an actual coach, and I don't mean that as a slight, but I mean, like, when you have the interim tag, it can be tough. I think they could do some damage. I do. I think that's why Heath was fired, honestly, is because I think he was underperforming with this team.
Yeah.
When you have Pookie, when you have Halong Wayne, when you have some of these players, St. Clair, who is kind of had a rougher season, but they have Clint Irwin as the backup. So I mean, that's a great backup to have.
Right.
So I do think that they can, with Reynoso, with Laud. I mean, this is a decent team, and this is a team I could see make a push. And if I am looking at a successful season for them, I'm going to bump it up a bit here. Successful season. Well, no, I can't because they don't have a coach. It's like, I was going to say successful season is maybe like 7.
Top 4.
Right?
Oh, okay.
Like, not wild card, but I feel like with a darn interim, I feel like if they make the wild card, I'll be shocked. So I'll say successful season. It's probably got to be the wild card. Now, again, that could change if summer comes and they say, "Hey, here's Jose Mourinho coming over. He's left Roma,
big Minnesota guy."
Then I'm like, "Oh, geez, maybe I have to bump this up a bit." But as it stands right now with the interim, like you said, the guy from Barnsley is not even really focused on the club yet because he's doing his Barnsley stuff. I have to put like interim coach. I have to think that probably they're going to struggle a bit. So I probably have just wild card.
Yeah, the interim coach thing, it never pans out. I can't remember the last time it did. Like, I can't remember the last time an interim coach really just, especially at the beginning of the year, it feels so uncertain.
I don't think it's ever happened at the beginning of a year.
It's wild.
Usually what happens is the interim coach they just say, hey, I don't understand why they don't just say, you're the coach.
Yeah.
And then guess what? We're going to fire you anyway at the end of the season. I'm going to hire my guy. Maybe that's too difficult or whatever.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like the people looking at the coach like, dude, you're not even going to be here. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just weird.
Yeah. But exciting pieces like this team. This could go either way. And the West, again, the West is so wild. Like our predictions, I think on this are going to be absolutely all over. But yeah, I'm gonna go higher. Like I'd say a successful season for them, I think would be 6-5, like 5-6, just below the cusp, maybe competing for the chance to be in the top four because I do think that this roster is pretty darn talented. They just need a coach. And if they hire a good coach, I could see this team making that jump. So I'm going to say 5-6. I'm going to say that's where where a successful season should be for this team. Because I just think that the talent's there. If they're healthy, then I think that's where most people would say that's going to be success is if they have that 5-6.
All right, we got one more club to talk about here for the preview, and that is the Portland Timbers.
Timber.
Yeah, well, they are going down. So they're yelling timber as they. All right, let's look back at 2023 first because this was a season that was a little rough for them. Poor start. They took 1 win out of their first 7. And this is another club I felt like we were always thinking, all right, they're going to turn it around. They're going to turn it around. But their defense gave up 58 goals. Gio Savarese gets fired, right? 2 MLS Cup appearances with them and an MLS's back tournament title. But now, largely, I feel like they're going to be turning over the roster pretty heavily. I have theirs as a D for last year. We used to always joke, right? Like, which of Portland or Seattle are going to be in the MLS Cup final this year? You know, because there was that string of years where it was one of those two.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't even close. You know, they were not great last season as they finished 10th, right outside a playoff spot, 1 point behind a playoff spot, but I think still bad enough to be a D. I feel like if you're not in the playoffs, you cannot be like higher than a D unless if you won a cup outside of it. You know, like if you made some other sort of big moves or a big thing. And I feel sorry for Gio Savarese because I do think he is a great coach, but it just wasn't working last year. So I have them as a D for 2023.
Yeah, they made a push once Miles Joseph took over. Went 5-0-2, 5 wins, 0 losses, and 2 draws after he lost his first one in the saddle. And like, I don't know, it was a weird season because, again, like you said with Portland, I feel like the expectations is always playoffs. Like this is a team that always makes the playoffs. And the fact that they really struggled last season and missed out on the playoffs was just, I guess, I don't know. It felt fitting when Gio was let go, and they did try to make that resurgence, but ended up falling short. But it did. It felt like, and it feels like the end of an era in Portland because we'll get into 2024 and what that means. What I mean by the end of an era, because there's a lot of players that have left that were big parts of this team for quite some time, including Gio. And they make an interesting hire, and we'll get into that too. But yeah, this Timbers team, Jordan, I think if we're looking at the teams and I had to pick a team that's in full rebuild mode, I think this is the one. I think this is the team that a full rebuild is needed. I don't feel like the veteran players that they have left are really going to contribute much. I think there's a lot of interesting pieces. Evander, there's talk about him leaving. Yeah, I don't know. I think this is a team that sees the writing on the wall, and it's going to get real ugly. And not to mention their ownership is problematic, to say the least. So Yeah, this could get Jordan. I'm going to say it now. This could get LA Galaxy bad. Like this could get ugly for the years to come because I think that this is where that team's headed.
I think I'm a little bit more optimistic about them, but I do have this as not being a wild card playoff team. So like I don't have them. I have a successful season. I know we're not at that point yet, but I have a
Yeah,
successful season. It's just not being bottom because there is so much turnover that is going to be tough, right? But I mean, you have the Crapo signing, right? Like that is great. I can't believe
yeah,
they
that,
went
that, that
there.
one's a weird one.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
um, we have Kamal Miller coming over, who's kind of bounced around lately. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm not a big Phil Neville fan, right? So it's funny. He's in the Beckham doc that I'm watching right now.
So
Eh,
scary.
and he's fine enough in that, but it's
Yeah.
like maybe not the best coach, right? And it'll be interesting to see what he does with uh this this Portland team because it is such a aging roster that really it makes sense now why they were so bad last year. I think if you look back at it and you think that was the end of a dynasty, and now they didn't win like a dynasty, but they reached two finals. They had two MLS Cup finals. They won an MLS's back. It's three finals they were reaching, and it just was 1 year too many that they tried to stretch that core, and it's now time to just kind of hit the reset, unfortunately. And so I have them just like don't finish bottom, and I think that they will be. And maybe Portland fans can then come at me after this if they listen to this and say, no, that's too low. Like I think a successful season has to be playoffs. We have to be playoffs or bust just because of their history. Then yeah, I can see that. I mean, they missed by 1 point, and then maybe we're grading them a little better this, this year. But ultimately, I'm curious to see how this goes, but it doesn't feel like Portland. It just doesn't feel like Timbers this year. And what I mean by that is just like Phil Neville being at the helm. I never would have thought that for this club should have been going to get a bigger name. They've fallen so much from the Caleb Porter and Gio Savarese run, So yeah, I don't know.
So they've got two DP spots open. Sebastian Blanco's era with Portland Timbers done. Gio Savarese obviously done. We talked about that. You go into Niskoda's gone. Jimmy Chara's gone, which is Jimmy Chara. Sorry, is when I look at Portland, like he was Portland to me. Like Diego Chara, of course, a fantastic player and a Timbers legend. Jimmy too, like the Chara brothers, like they were the heartbeat it felt. And Diego's 30, and I don't imagine Diego will be there much longer. Eric Williamson coming back from a nasty injury that put him out last year. Kamal Miller has turned into the journeyman. Like he's no longer the Kamal Miller that we all know. Maxime Crepeau, I love that. Don't know what the hell that was. Very confusing. It's one of those signings though that like Jordan, I think Phil Neville in Miami had, where it was like, oh wow, like Gonzalo Higuain. Oh, that's a great signing. Whoa, that's cool. But nothing else comes of it because they don't do anything else. This team could have 3 DP spots. If Evander does leave for Flamengo, then I think this team is disastrous if Evander leaves. Like this turns into a really bad team if Evander's gone. And that's where I put that. That's why I'm so low on them, so pessimistic about where they're headed, because Phil Neville is not great. 31 wins, 41 losses, and 11 draws in Miami. And he had some top talent and he had the funds to do things and he never put it together with Beckham. Like, weird because as soon as Messi became available, Beckham was quick. So something makes me think that Phil Neville had a lot of say in what was going on in Miami. I think he's going to have the same here in Portland. Like you said, Jordan, this doesn't feel like Portland anymore. Like I was around when Portland was good, when they were making MLS Cup finals against NYCFC. They were a good team. They had great pieces. Yes, their veteran pieces were getting old. They're starting to deteriorate. We see the end of an era right now. But I think like this team is close to circling a drain. Like that Maxime Crepeau signing, great, but what else are you going to do? Because the rest of this roster is beyond anything that I've ever seen from a Portland Timbers team. Like I just
So,
don't feel like it's very good.
so what did you have a successful season? Did you say that?
Successful season for this team is staying out of the last spot in the Western Conference.
Okay, not
I'm
bottom.
being harsh. Yeah, I'm going to be
That's
real
what I had.
harsh.
And what
Okay.
did you grade them for last year?
Did I give it a grade? I don't
Oh
remember.
no,
I'm going to give it a D minus.
D minus. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so those are locked in. We will revisit those at the end of the year and kind of see if they surpassed their previous year's grades. But if you're looking for us to predict where they're going to finish in the table, because that's not the same thing as what's a successful season, that will come right before the kickoff of the season. We'll do our big prediction show where we'll give you our East predictions, our West Coach of the Year, Golden Boot, MVP, Supporter Shield, U.S. Open Cup, MLS Cup, Leagues Cup. We'll probably save Leagues Cup winner for closer to Leagues Cup. But we'll have all of that stuff at the end of all of our recaps, of our previews. And it'll be its own fun episode, big episode right before the start of the season, like it usually is. But if you happen to just be with us for the first time here, wanted to explain that. And looking at the list of them here, we're like never right anyway, so it doesn't even matter. You're on mute, Logan.
It's a really fun conversation where
Yes, it
Jordan and
is.
I get to basically the one good thing that does come out of it, predictions be damned. We are usually pretty decent at identifying what are some of the key storylines
Yeah.
that are going to go into the season that fans can look forward to. If you're not getting to watch these teams play, we can help in saying, hey, this might be something that you're interested in watching.
Yeah. We also do have some fun stuff that we'll be doing throughout the course of this
Yeah.
season as well. So let's talk about next episode, right? So right now we're going to be kind of dropping these maybe once or twice a week. We're going to get them all done before the kickoff to the season. So there's going to be no set schedule. It's going to be when we can get these guests, when we can record it, and when we can edit and put them out. So next episode, though, we're going to the bottom of the East. So it's going to be the bottom five teams of the East, which were Toronto, Inter Miami, Chicago Fire, DC United, and NYCFC. So we're going to go back to the East. We're going to grade the worst teams of the East, and we're going to give the report cards for 2023 for them. So hopefully everybody will enjoy that. Obviously, there's a team in that listing that has some big expectations. Of course, we're talking about Toronto FC. We're talking about Inter Miami,
Yeah.
and that's who we're going to have our guest. Logan, who do we have coming on to talk Inter Miami?
Yeah, so you'll know her from previous. I think this was this last year? No, year before that, I believe.
Yeah, I think it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, it was 2 years ago. So we had Alex Windley on, and Alex currently is covering Inter Miami. Words have been published on Bleacher Report in 90 Men. So if you read 90 Men, a great website, by the way. And she's also, Jordan, a proud member of the Soccer Reporters. She also writes for the Heron's Nest, and I believe does the podcast. So she's a Substack. So if you're not reading Alex and you want to follow Alex, she is easily one of my favorite people to follow along with. And Jordan, she's got a really important role this year. Her followers will know her work. But to cover this team, I'm really excited to talk to her because I feel like this is getting in, right? This is getting into really talking to people that cover this club that might go down, Jordan, fingers crossed, as one of the best teams in MLS history. Hopefully we get to see that play out because I think this is going to be a really fun season.
Yeah, so I just want to say real quick, Austin and Philly are in the battle of preseason right now, and it is 1-1. Quinn Sullivan scored in the first half, and Austin FC Danny Pereira just equalized it like 23 seconds ago while we're sitting here. It's not streaming anywhere, but I saw somebody filmed it while they're at the game, and like people are tweeting it. So since we talked Austin, I just thought I would share that right now.
We're back, baby.
While we're recording. It's 1-1.
We're back.
All right, so if you want to give us a follow or send us any of the thoughts or your report cards for your team, at Stateside Show on all of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, at TikTok now. Logan is putting up some of these clips on TikTok. We'll probably do some TikTok exclusive stuff later and like reels and all that kind of stuff. So that's same handle at Stateside Show over on TikTok. If you want to email us, statesideshow@gmail.com, or you can like and subscribe here on goals.tv, which we're a part of, or YouTube if you're watching. And you can also comment and give us your report cards there. Make sure that you also rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. All right. Well, thank you all for watching or listening along with us. We'll catch you next time when we talk those bottom 5 teams of the Eastern Conference.